many of us, our first experience with Mexican beer included a beach and a squeeze of lime. But for the next step, you gotta go beyond the beach. Now, Tecate for sure is an iconic beverage here in Baja. But what a lot of people don't know is that it's named after the town of Tecate, right here on the US-Mexico border. Now, full disclosure, Tecate is owned by Cerveceria Cuauhtémoc Moctezuma, which also owns Bohemia, one of our show sponsors. Back in 1944, Alberto Aldrete started making this crisp brew, and well, right away its popularity spread all across Mexico and into the US. These days, Mexican beer all over Mexico is starting to expand into the smaller craft microbrews. In Baja, there's an especially lively scene. There's this hip little pub called Ultramarino in Ensenada. It's owned by chef Alain Genchi, and it's focused on promoting small breweries. Chef Alain invited me to taste some of the local craft beers and to see how they pair with the area's stellar seafood.
Well, Rick, we're gonna try the Cucapá,
Okay.
Clásica. This is an ale beer.
So we have a lager and an ale.
An ale.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Now that's delicious. This is what I think of more as kind of the classic Mexican beers.
It's more the Mexican style.
Mexican style,
And
light,
this is
crisp. This is definitely a
different
microbrew.
brewery.
So I think it's wonderful to have beer with light food, especially when you're thinking about beach kind of food and stuff like that.
This is perfect with ceviche.
Alain served 3 types of ceviche: sea snail with pasilla chili, scallop ceviche with salt, pepper, and lime, and some octopus ceviche that was made with dark beer. This one's too light for it.
That's more from, I think, for the scallop.
For the scallop one. For me, the stronger flavors of the ale matched beautifully with the octopus ceviche. The lighter lager beer went so well with the scallops. Our next pairing was a couple of fuller-bodied, more complex beers.
Amarga. How do you say amarga in English?
Bitter. It's got that hoppy bitterness at the end. This is way lighter even though the color is darker. Now, what kind of food were you thinking about going with this one?
I suggest the oyster taco for this.
Now, tell me which beer I should choose to go with my first bite of oyster taco.
I suggest the chupacabras.
That is delicious. That's delicious. Okay. You're a smart man. You're a smart man. That bit of bitterness from the hops at the end, that's all perfect to cut through this one. So where are we going to go from here? You have darker beers, heavier beers than these?
We can try the Bufadora from Tijuana.
Yes.
And the Obscura from Cucapá.
Okay, let's go. Alain thought that some baby clams steamed in beer would pair well with those darker brews.
Try the bread.
I don't know where to go, to bread or to the beer. Do you think the stronger flavor beer?
I think with this could be the Bufadora.
That's a perfect combination. You knew exactly what you were going for. That's a great match. So do you think this is going to catch on all through Mexico? Do you think that we're going to be seeing a lot of microbrew beers in lots of places in Mexico?
Right now in Ensenada, I think with the wine is very close. The idea from make wine and make beer that are very close. So I think microbreweries in Ensenada in 5 years are another thing.
It's so wonderful how around Ensenada there are so many artisanal food products being made, because it's certainly the wine region of Mexico, the beer region of Mexico, and also so many food products like olive oil and wonderful fish and shellfish. You know, this is a place that is just rich with great food. Warm clam ceviche. Sounds kind of unusual, but if you think about it as clams that are cooked with a little beer and then finished off with some lime juice, you sort of get the idea of where we're headed with this particular recipe. Now, when you buy clams, you'll want to store them in your refrigerator over ice just to keep them super cold so that you don't lose any of them. And then the second step is to put them into a bowl, cover them with cold tap water. Now, clams don't really like fresh water, so they'll sort of get stirred up a little bit. And over the next half hour or so, they'll spit out all the sand that they might have inside of them. I'm going to take them out of the water now, put them into a colander, and you'll see how much sand is at the bottom. Sometimes there's a fair amount, sometimes just a little hint of it. But there's just a little bit down in the bottom here. I can feel it. Now I give these guys a scrub just to make sure that they're clean before we put them into the pot and cook them. Now on to the cooking of these clams. The first thing that I'm going to do is to melt a little butter into a pot that'll comfortably hold all of those clams. A couple of tablespoons that I'll put over a kind of medium heat. Now while that's melting, I'm going to cut up some green chili and garlic. And with this jalapeno that I've got here, I'm going to cut the stem end off of it. Cut it open. I could cut out the veins and the seeds if I wanted to make it a little less spicy. But in this particular preparation, I want all of the spice of the jalapeno. So I'm just going to cut it up, veins, seeds, and all. All of that's going to go into the pot with the butter here, and we'll cook it until the garlic is aromatic and the chilies begin to soften. That'll just take a minute or two. Now, about a half a cup of beer. You're looking for something like a kind of crisp Pilsner for this particular preparation. Remember, there's lime juice that's going in at the end here. And to that, I'm going to add about a half a cup of chicken broth. There's no need to do a homemade chicken broth for this. A good quality store-bought one will do just fine. When that all comes to a simmer, and boy is it incredibly aromatic and delicious smelling right now, I'm going to add the clams to it. And these guys will go into the pot. Cover them and it'll take about 3 minutes for them to cook, just enough time for me to juice some lime and chop up a little bit of cilantro. Yep, they've all opened up. I'm going to take them out and divide them between 4 bowls while I let all this delicious juice reduce by about half. Okay, now the final seasonings for this. I've got the lime juice, a good handful of chopped cilantro. Now ladle that into the little cups with our clams there to make what I think is going to be a great appetizer. I've recently been thinking a lot about trying my hand at beer making. So I asked Jared Rubin, the head pub brewer at Goose Island and one of my favorite brewmasters, to step me through the process from beginning to end. Okay, Jared, now I have never brewed beer in my life.
Okay.
I've tasted some beer in my life, but never brewed it. And so I need to learn exactly what the steps are so I can appreciate it better. So walk me through it. Where do we start?
Well, first thing we're going to do is we have to make a recipe.
Okay. I'm good at making recipes.
I know that.
Okay.
So the way we create our recipe is probably similar to how you create your salsa. You got your raw ingredients.
Yeah.
For us, our base malt here is going to be pale. So I'll give you some of that.
Okay.
And it's really important that we taste everything before we start our process.
Okay, so you just taste this in this raw steak.
Delicious. Like cereal.
Like muesli.
Like muesli.
Okay.
Like muesli.
Okay.
The pale is going to be our base malt, and
Okay.
this chocolate and this caramel malt is a specialty, so we don't have to really use
specialty
this much.
malt. So this is your base, and then you add all these others to create different flavors.
Absolutely.
What's the next step?
The next thing we do is we use this auger right here, which is essentially a grain elevator. We pour our malt in there.
Okay, the mixture that we've made.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we pour it in here, and it travels up to our mash tun over here. In the mash tun, we essentially make a giant pot of oatmeal. You got your grains, you got your hot water.
Okay.
So you want to take a look?
I do. I want to see what's going on in this tank. Okay.
So this is all our mash.
It does look like oatmeal. You're exactly right.
It smells like some fresh grains and bread. What's going on here is the sparge process, and essentially
Sparge?
Sparge, yes.
Okay.
It's brewing.
Another one of the brewing terms I don't know.
It's a brewing term for a hot shower. And so the grain gets a hot shower at a temperature of between 168 and 170, and that hot water trickles down through the bed of grain, all the way down to the bottom where there's a drain.
Yeah.
It goes from that drain all the way back to our grant, our container, where you'll see the wort or the malt tea. It transfers through this pipe right here.
Right.
All the way down into our brew kettle.
Okay, the mash tun, the brew kettle.
And it's actually a giant kettle. Underneath you actually have a fire, a direct fire system.
Okay.
So it'd just be if you had a giant pot.
Okay.
After we've transferred it to a certain level, we're going to start our boil. And similar to cooking, we're reducing.
Concentrating the flavors.
Absolutely. And our seasonings in the brewing world are hops.
You guys are so simple. Even though you use strange words, it's so simple.
So,
Okay.
here's some beautiful Hallertau.
Oh my,
hops.
the aroma.
Beautiful.
Oh, wow. That makes my mouth water. Jared explained that after the hops are added, once at the start of the boil for bitterness and once at the end for aromatics, everything then moves over to fermentation. So this is the fermentation tank.
Yes.
We got that boiled down wort that is all hopped out, pumped over here. How does it ferment?
Well, once we've transferred it over here, the yeast, which we're hitched in there, is going to start eating the sugars, which we got from the grain.
But you have to add yeast
Oh,
to
yes.
it to make that fermentation happen.
Yes, but it happens within 24 hours.
Oh, okay. After the fermentation, where does it go?
The last stop is the bright tank.
Bright tank?
The bright tank, and that's where the beer is carbonated.
Oh, okay. Well, you lost me on that part of it because I was thinking about doing it at my house. I don't have like a
some
bright
home brewing.
tank. I was thinking about doing some. You've taught me now, okay? So what would I use instead of a bright tank?
Well, you don't need a bright tank. All you need is some bottles, and you'll transfer your fermented beer into bottles, and it's still actively fermenting. So once you seal it up, it's got a little bit of sugar in there,
Right.
and in a couple weeks, you'll have some nice sparkly beer.
Now, one of the things that I think is really unique about your approach to beer making is you're not just looking for a beer that's going to taste good, but it's going to taste good with food.
Oh yeah, we brew beer for food. So when we're coming up with a recipe, I think about what dishes do I want to have this with.
Cool. That to me, as a chef, that's music to my ears. Two expats from Colorado have started their own microbrewery in Mexico, and they pair their beers with pub food at Baja Brewing Company. I was lucky enough to have the head brewer, Jordan Gardenhire, taste me through all the varieties that they have to offer.
The first beer that we have in our lineup here is the Baja Blonde.
Baja Blonde, okay. How is it made?
This one is light malts, lightly hopped, and it's really the closest to a Mexican-style beer that we have.
Now, the next one in this lineup is super dark, and I would have expected that to go at the very end, but why did you put it there?
It looks like a really heavy stout,
Yeah,
but
it
it's
does.
actually the lightest bodied beer we make.
Even lighter than the blonde?
It actually is.
Okay, I want to go into this one. I see what you're getting at with the lightness there, but it's also got some dark notes in the flavor.
Very flavorful, a little bit toasted, coffee perhaps. This is our Pele Roja, or Redhead Red.
You named it after yourself?
Well, somebody named it after somebody. I'm not going to point
okay.
any fingers, but yeah, I do make it.
Well, this is super delicious. Now, there's a lot of flavor going on in that one.
A lot of character.
Yeah.
This one you wouldn't want to drink so much on the beach, but maybe with dinner, maybe with a pizza actually.
I think that's what I want to do. That's really super delicious. They bake their pizzas in a wood-fired oven. And the cool thing is that they use some of the beer ingredients to make their pizza.
This is my partner Rob.
Hello, Rob.
Very good to see you.
Rob does all the restaurant side of things.
And I can see we've got the iconic pairing of beer and pizza here, except this is beer pizza and beer, right?
This is beer pizza because we actually use beer in the dough itself. We
Okay.
use our special beer yeast, and if you can see, there's seeds on the outside, which is the grain that we use to actually make the beer.
So what you have on the outside is barley.
Barley, exactly, right. 2-row barley.
I don't think I've ever seen that before, but I don't just want to see it. I want to
Sure, yeah,
eat it
we'll
too.
talk it in there.
Let's do it. It works. Super classic. The richness of the beer goes beautifully with the richness of the tomato that's on there. The fresh basil just kind of pops through the whole thing. Good stuff. One of my favorite things in the whole world is roasted tomatillo salsa. I just love the tanginess of it, the spiciness, and that little bit of sweetness that you get by roasting the tomatillos. I love this stuff so much I even use it as a pizza sauce. Well, when you want to make roasted tomatillo salsa, the first thing you have to do is take your fresh tomatillos and take the husks off of each one of them. They have a kind of sticky substance on the outside of it that you'll want to rinse off. Now I'm going to put them onto a small baking sheet so that I can roast them under a broiler. Now the chilies that are going to go in here are Serrano chilies, and all you have to do for those is to take the little stem end off. You can pop that off easily. Put those onto the baking sheet along with those tomatillos, and then we're just going to run it under the broiler. You want to make sure that your oven rack is at its highest position, about 4 inches away from that broiler. After about 4 or 5 minutes, they'll be softening and blotchy black on the top. Pull them out, turn them all over, run them back under the broiler, and let them roast for another 4 or 5 minutes on the other side. Then let them cool to room temperature. Now, the cooled tomatillos and chilies I'm going to combine in the food processor, and to that I'm going to add a little fresh cilantro. So we've got a fresh element in this salsa to combine with those roasty elements of the tomatillos and green chilies. I like it to be the consistency of a kind of coarse puree. I'm going to scrape that into a bowl now and check the consistency of it. Add some salt. I'm going to stir that up. Last ingredient, a little white onion. So I'm going to cut the top and bottom off and chop it into very fine dice. bowl, give it a stir, and you've got one of the best roasted tomatillo salsas in the world. I'm going to show you what has become the Bayless family favorite pizza, and it's going to use roasted tomatillo salsa. Now, yesterday I started what I think is the absolute easiest pizza dough. It's that no-knead dough that rises overnight. First, I measured 2 cups of all-purpose flour into a bowl, and then added 1/4 teaspoon of that instant or rapid rise yeast and a teaspoon of salt. I stirred all of that together, then measured in 1/2 cup of room temperature water and 1/3 cup of beer. You just stir that until it sort of comes together, but it still looks like a very rough mass. Then cover it with plastic and leave it on the countertop overnight. The first thing that we have to do is to cook the chorizo. So this is Mexican chorizo. It's not Spanish chorizo, which is a cured product that you could just simply slice and use. This is more like an American breakfast sausage, and it has to be thoroughly cooked. So I'm going to put it over about medium heat and then break up the sausage and cook it until it's completely cooked through and starting to brown. That'll take about 10 minutes or so. Now on to the pizza crust. I've got a rimmed baking sheet here and my overnight risen dough. You can see that it smells really good. All of that heady, yeasty aroma there. And it still looks a little bit rough, but it looks like bread dough. Now on this baking sheet, I'm going to splash on a bunch of olive oil. And then I'll take my dough and turn it out into the baking sheet. First thing that's going to go on is roasted tomatillo salsa. Just spread that in a thin layer over the dough. Now next I'm going to scatter on the cooked chorizo sausage. Just give it a nice little coating all over. A couple of slices of red onion, really thin slices so that they'll cook in the oven. And then a little bit of fresh goat cheese. All over Mexico, there's wonderful goat cheeses to be had. Now I've had the oven on at 500 degrees for about half an hour because I want to make sure that it's really hot before I put the pizza in. Pizza should cook hot and really fast. I'm going to cook it in the middle of the oven. It'll take 20 to 25 minutes. I'm going to sprinkle on a little of this Mexican queso añejo. Now, if you don't have that, you could use a little Romano. It has a similar kind of flavor. I'm going to take a few leaves of cilantro to sprinkle over the top. Pizza and beer.